Question 1. Why did it take you 5.5 years to make Jagged? Well, it didn't actually take 5.5 years to make it. It took about a year, and really the bulk of it was done in about the last 6 months, so the second half of 2005. But there was a 5.5 year gap between it coming out and the Pure album before it. So to answer that, there was a lot of things happen. First of all, when Pure came out, I did quite a lot of touring for it. So at least the first year, I would imagine, without looking at the dates, after Pure came out, I was pretty much tied up with promoting it and touring it and so on and so on. And then it came time to get the deal for not the deal, but to sort of make the next album with Eagle and so on, and that finished. Not entirely unexpectedly, but nonetheless, it finished. So then you got to figure out what else you're going to do. Took a while to, you sort of negotiate with them for a little bit, so that's killing time. And then I went with Artful after a while, and that took a little time, to get that deal sorted out. And then they did Exposure, and then they did Hybrid. And then these are albums that were supposed to be there so that I could have a breathing space, really. They'll be filling the gaps while I was getting on with the new one. But what actually happened was I ended up being quite heavily involved in those as well. So I didn't really do that much on the new one. I was just busy promoting Hybrid and so on. And we had the Rip single and the Crazier single, and I got very involved with those and making videos and things like that. So just carried on being tied up with other things, really. And then obviously Baby Raven come along, and that took a great big chunk out of it. And just stuff, really. Then I got the problems with Artful, and that got involved in it. Took a while to sort that out. And in between all these things, I was doing lots of gigging and all that sort of stuff as well, and various other little projects. And I was writing when I wrote a lot of stuff when all this was going on, but nothing ever got finished. I would go away and write a lot of stuff, come back, and then something else would happen, and I'd get involved in that. Then I'd go and write some more stuff, and so it was such a stop start kind of way of working. It just never really got any momentum, and it never started to build up at all. And the album didn't have a real sound to it, it was just bits and pieces, right up until quite close to the end when it all started to come together. But that's about it, really. It just massively distracted, and lots of other things to do, and never really got on top of getting the album sorted out. Question 2. Does the album have a common theme lyrically? Reasonably common, yep. The most of the songs are to do with me looking back at the things that I've got involved in or been drawn into, and all of it, how can I put this, the darker side of some of the things I've got involved in. Various people that I've met that introduced me to things. I've been calling it a diary of shame, which is, it's true-ish, I think, to be honest about it. If you look back on your life, there are things that you would have done which you might not be quite so proud of or willing to talk about, even though it might have been fun. And I've had a very, very full life, as you probably can imagine. I've done a lot of stuff over the years, and I've been in a position because of the being in a band and being in this business for such a long time, that a lot of opportunities to try things and even to just adjust the way I think about things have come along. And so I've also met quite a lot of odd people, some cool, some not so cool, and it's all of these experiences, all of these things that colour the way you are, or the person that you become. It was looking back at all of the darker side of those things, and how I got into it, and the effect that it had, and all that sort of stuff. So, but it's very it is not always, but often it's been exaggerated for the sake of drama, because it is an album and you are trying to create very powerful images with the words that you choose and the things that you describe, and so quite often it is exaggerated to make it seem all the more powerful or disturbing or whatever it might be, depending on the song. But there is a definite thread of truth running throughout pretty much every single one. So yes, short answer, yeah, it does have a common theme. It's my sordid little past. Not always sordid, actually. It's not always about that sort of stuff, but just things, really. Just various things that you get into. Question 3. Andy Gray was supposed to be producing the album initially. What happened? Well, yeah, he was. Andy Gray was going to be doing the whole album with me, and we did the first song, Jagged, and that went really, really well. And then Andy bought a big manor house on the Isle of Wight, and south of England, and so he got really, really into that and tied up with that. And the only problem I was having was he was trying to sort of do my thing as well as he was doing doing up this big house, and so it was just taking a little bit longer to get stuff back than I was kind of needed, and so it was just unfortunate timing, really. That just as I started to get the album together, so Andy goes and buys this big house and has this major project on his hand that he's got to deal with quickly, because he was turning it back into a tourist attraction again, and he's done it, and it's brilliant, and it's really, really impressive. But it did mean that the album was kind of more delayed than I thought it was going to be, or the songs coming back were more delayed than I thought it was going to be. So I did panic slightly, actually, because at that time we had a completely different deadline to the one that it ended up being, one of many. And at that point, the deadline was getting closer, and I was just worrying about it, so I moved on. Question 4. Why did you stop working with Sulphur, who took over co-production after Andy Gray? Well, with Sulphur, I ended up having a similar problem to what I had with Andy, actually, in that I started to give them songs, and initially they came back really quickly. It was very vibey and really quite exciting. And then the gaps, it just started to get much longer. Several months would pass, and I wouldn't have anything back from them. And it was again. I'm now into my second deadline, I think, or third, whatever it was, and it was all becoming a bit of a problem. And I began to realise that things just weren't gonna happen. And there was a few other bits and pieces involved, but basically they were both busy doing other things as well as my stuff. It was partly my fault because I was later getting my songs to them than I said it would be, so they'd actually moved into another period, where they had other things they're already supposed to be doing, and Rob got a gig with Prodigy and so on, and it was a shame because what they were doing was really good, really good, and I still have about, I think, 5 versions of the songs that they did together. I've got a version of the song called Melt that Monty did on his own without Rob, and there is the version of Fold, which has come out already on the American version of the album that Rob did, and there's another version of the song called Blind that Rob's done on his own, which is stunning. There's also an Andy Gray version of Jagged, so there are all these other versions which are just sitting there waiting to come out. So it was never a problem with any of the other sort of co-producers that I worked with about what they were doing, because what they were doing was great. It was always just a matter of time, and things are taking a little bit longer to come back to me than I wanted and needed, and as a result of the Sulphur problem, I then moved on again, and because of that, I had to put the whole album back and come up with yet another deadline, and that was the actual final one. Question 5. What made you choose Ed Fenton as the eventual co-producer for Jagged? Well, I was having problems with I was having time problems with Sulphur, which I've already talked about. Wasn't too sure what to do about that, but realised I had a big problem. But I had known Ed for years, and in recent times he'd actually asked me to do some guest vocals on what was his own solo debut album. Now, up until then, his music, he's a techno DJ, so his music had always been techno orientated, obviously, and I'm not really a big fan of that, so I wasn't interested in it at all. But when he started asking me to do the guest vocals on his own album, which he calls proper music, without any insult intended to his techno friends, I'm sure, I was just really, really impressed with it as to how massive it sounded, and the sounds that he was using were just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And these were just the demos. Anyway, then he got me to sing on some stuff, which I did. And a bit later, he brought those songs back again, having done some more production work to them after my lyrics went on. After my vocals went on to his lyrics. And I'd already been impressed, but the difference it was amazing. Now they really sounded huge and epic. They were great. And then a bit after that, he brought them back and he'd done even more to them, and it was just getting better. And I couldn't believe it, how quickly they were improving, and how brilliant they sounded from someone that was only working on their first ever album. And it was just massively impressive. And I thought that all this time I've been working on trying to come up with a direction and a sound for the album, and although I knew what I wanted, and although a lot of the stuff that had been done with the other people beforehand, I hadn't really touched that point that was going to be the starting point for the absolute ultimate direction of the album. I was still floundering around a little bit. And when I started to listen to what Aid was doing, I realised that if I could take elements of that and bolt it onto to what I was doing, and then kind of reshape it slightly, then I think I was there at that point. That was what I was looking for. And so I took a gamble and gave Aid one track called Scanner, and said, just go away with that and see what you think and see what you come up with, and then we just see where we go from there. Initially, it was a test. If the song came out really, really good, then maybe I'd have that song with Aid producing it on the album and attach it to the other things that I already had with the other people. So that was the idea initially, and then if it was absolutely brilliant, then possibly do the rest of the album with him. I really wasn't sure at that point what was going to happen. I just wanted to see how it would turn out. And it was at this point that I gave Rob a track as well, the Fold song, with a similar idea, really. Anyway, it came back and it was really, really cool, really, really cool. And at that point, I thought I like this so much that I could actually see not just the rest of the album sounding like this, but what I'd done before possibly sounding like that. So then I gave him another couple of songs that had already been worked on and said have a go with those. And they come back and they were, again, absolutely brilliant. So I thought, this is it. But it's a big gamble, because now we're halfway through 2005. So I just said to him, what do you think? Do you want to do the whole record? I mean, going back to all the things that have already been done and doing them again, plus all the other stuff that I've still got to write, which I'm now going to get on with. But we've only got 6 months at the most, to do it in. So what do you reckon? And we decided to go for it, and it was a massive job. You think you got to do an entire album, half of which is still to be written, in about 6 months, and completely redoing everything that's already been done so far. And the reason was that the things that have been done so far, great as they were, just had a different sound to what we were coming up with together, with what me and Aid were coming up with. And it wasn't possible to add the Aid Fenton produced songs to the others, and for it all to sound as if it was one cohesive album. It sounded bits and pieces. It sounded like this person had done that song or someone else had done that song, and it just all sounded like bits and pieces. All good bits and pieces, but that's not what I wanted. And that's why I've kept the other versions, the previous versions, as separate things, and why they'll come out later in the year or whenever, because they are really good, and I'm really proud of them, and I think what those people did was great, but it didn't hang together as a cohesive collection of songs, and that's what I wanted, and that's why I went with Aid, and that's why we redid everything, and we ended up with the Jagged that's out there now, and why I just think that was exactly the right decision, and I'm really happy with what we come up with. Question 6. What did Aid Fenton add that made working on the album together so exciting? He's the way he goes after sound is very, very impressive. The way he understands the technology and his willingness to experiment and work with sound is very, very, very impressive. And it goes back to the way I used to be when I first started, and I recognised that in him, and I just thought that's exactly what I needed, and it gave me a kick, and it made me work harder than I probably would have done without him. It was just a very exciting thing. This constant onslaught of amazing sounds coming back week after week after week, and it was more than that actually. He hears songs differently somehow. He doesn't hear it from a guitarist's point of view. He doesn't hear them from a drummer's point of view. He hears things differently. So you don't get a song back that's got an obvious. You can get a song that coming back from certain people that I worked with over the years, and you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get an emphasis on what they do best, and that's fair enough. That's why you work with them. That's completely understandable and right thing to expect. But with Aid, you don't quite get that, because he just hears things differently, and stuff's coming back, and you just think, where'd that come from? It's most of the time it's genius, and you think, where did that come from? It's off the wall way of seeing stuff, and that of course fires me up again, and I'm thinking, I didn't imagine that. Now, so I'm off. Oh, what about this, and this, and that's why it was exciting, because it was just you were constantly being triggered to think differently about things, and to come at it from different angles. But underneath it all, I'd written these massive, what I like to think of, sort of anthemic choruses, and these ethereal kind of lovely verse lines, and it was all having to hang together. And the only brief that I gave Aid was, everything has to sound epic. I want everything to be as big and as powerful as it can be, but I also want to have the massive range of dynamics. I want it to go from tiny to massive, back to tiny to massive, and everything in between, but to leap from one to the other. But all the choruses, really it's the choruses really I was talking about being epic. I just want it to sound like a really big, massive album, and that was the brief. Apart from that, do what you like, and then when I get it back, I can keep what I like, get rid of what I don't. I can add, it was just a really, really cool way of working. Question 7. What was the working process like with Aid? Did you work side by side? Nope, didn't work side by side at all. He worked in his studio in Nottingham, and I worked in mine down here. And the only time we met was when he was bringing stuff down, and we would talk about it, and I would, yes, I know it, nearly always yes. And occasionally when I said no to something, he would simply go back and work on it again. There was never any problems, never any ego. It was a really brilliant working relationship, very easy, very productive, very quick, and he just worked really, really hard, and he put a ridiculous amount of time into it, and it was only because of that dedication to it that it became feasible to get it out when we did. So I can't speak highly enough of him. The work that he did, the way that he applied himself to it, it has just been fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and we're definitely going to be doing the next one together. But the actual process itself is quite simple. I would write the songs, produce them up to a level that gave him clear directions to where it was going most of the time. He would then take them, add the whole world in the kitchen sink to it most of the time. That was almost a problem. Just so much stuff. Anyway, that would all come back, and then I'd have to just wade through it and just understand what he was going for and so on, and that often helped me to decide what to keep and what not to. And then it would be a matter of merging that version with my original version and try to come up with a composite sound which was consistent with what the other songs had been up to that point, and making sure it was what I wanted and so on. And there were times when you would get rid of things that I really, really loved, and I would just try to work them back in. And sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes some of the things just, the direction that the song had gone in was so radically right. That's a stupid way of putting it, but it was different to the demo. It had gone in a different direction, and to try to bring some of my original parts in, parts that I really loved and thought were great, didn't work. And so I had to decide: did I want to go with this new direction? Did I want to stay with my original demos and try to take Fenton parts back in to make that better, or what? So there was a lot of that going on all the way through it. Most of the time I would go with the new one and then just come up with a whole lot of new parts of my own to add on top of that, rather than trying to hang on to my original parts. Or sometimes you could adapt the original parts, but it was a massive amount of work. because there was a massive amount of things being added to the demos, and also because I was writing so quickly. I was churning songs out, sometimes 2 or 3 a week, and it was just brilliant. It really, I've got to say that too many times, but it really was. It was an album that is so dark and heavy. It was actually really, really good fun to make. A really exciting album to make. Question 9. A lot of your fans thought that Jagged would be a much softer album after you became a father, especially for the second time. Why do you think that so obviously didn't happen, as Jagged is actually the darkest album you've ever made? Because the albums these days aren't reflections of how I'm feeling. That I'm able to go. The best way to describe it is this: I go into the studio. I can be in the house or out and about with wife and children, family, being family man, and I can go into the studio and open the door to the studio, and at the same time, it's as if I open the door to a different part of my brain, and it opens up to all of this other stuff, which is dark and heavy and menacing and perverse and all of the things that comes out onto these albums. And it just seems that I have no end of it, full of it, really. I got a huge amount of memories, and I look around the world and I see stuff which is just terrible all the time. The world is full of it. My own life, if I look back, has had a lot of it. And so there is no shortage of that sort of material. And the good thing now is that I can come out of the studio and the studio door closes, and so does the other door in my brain close, and I can go back to being family man again. And none of that stuff affects family. It doesn't affect the wife, and it doesn't affect the children. And that wouldn't have been true some time ago. It would all have been hanging out there for everyone to look at. But it isn't now. I can turn it on, and I can turn it on and turn it off. But I can open the door to it, or I can close the door to it again. And I've got it contained now. And I've got it much more under control than I used to have when I was younger. And that's a relief. It's a relief for everyone. It's a relief for me, and it's a relief for people around me, I think. Question 10. How did the 9 Inch Nails drummer Jerome come to be playing on the album? I went to see 9 Inch Nails when they played London recently, a few times actually, and hung out with them a fair bit afterwards, and Jerome especially, who I get on very well with, as does Gemma actually. And I can't remember. In fact, that's not true. I actually don't know how it came about because I wasn't there. But as I came back from one of the visits to the bar or the toilet, I can't remember, Jerome come up and said that he would be honoured to play on the album. Which, oh, hello. So it was just fantastic. To have him on the album was a real honour for me, not for him. It was an honour for me. I don't care what he says, and I was very, very proud of it. Very proud that he wanted to, and it was just such an easy thing. He's such a lovely person and such an easy person to deal with, and such a stunningly brilliant drummer that I was completely happy that it came about. I'm not sure if maybe Ade suggested it to him, or maybe he had suggested to Ade when he knew that Ade was producing the album that he would be up for doing it. I really don't know. But the fact is, he wanted to be on it, and he actually, after he'd done the first 2 songs, I met him again, and he said that he would be more than happy to do more on it, and that would have been cool. But I had actually run out of time by then. When all this happened, not just with Jerome actually, but also with the McCarricks who did the strings on it. It was right at the very, very end, and Richard doing drums on it actually, right at the very, very end of the recording, and the deadlines were approaching, and it had to be mixed, and I just ran out of time to get more Jerome and more Richard and so on it. So, but that's where it came about anyway. Question 11. Has the way you write songs changed over the years? Well, if you get right down to the basics, it hasn't changed at all, really. Forget the first few records, but 99% of my career, I sit down at a piano or a keyboard of some kind with a piano sound on it, and I I write that way. I just sit there, come up with tunes, very, very basic arrangements, verse, chorus here and middle eight there, and all the vocal lines actually we done on piano most of the time. And that's it. And that hasn't changed from when I wrote Our Friends Electric like that, and Down in the Park and all those things, right up to today. That's how I write songs. But from that moment onwards, you've got your basic tune, and then what you do with it from then on is out of all recognition to how it used to be. It's a totally different experience, what with computer-based recording and plug-in technology and all this kind of thing. And obviously the modern synthesizers are stunningly capable compared to the old ones. But the actual basic songwriting is very much as it used to be. Question 12. What is the song Scanner about? Well, Scanner is an exception to the actual main theme of the album. Well, I said before, the main theme is memories, really, me looking back at the darker things that I got into and things that have happened and so on. And Scanner is different, although no less dark in a way. I started to think about, because I've had children at quite a late age, and I started to realise that they're not going to be that old before I die, probably. I all got a bit depressing, not for me dying, but I just worrying about them. They would feel unprotected, and it's such a really rubbish dad thing. But I wrote Scanner along the lines of me when I'm dead, coming back as a ghost and trying to still look after them and reassure them, and you speak to them in their dreams and things like that. So it's all a bit odd and a bit weird talking about coming back to haunt your children, but it was meant to be lovely. It was meant to be a very beautiful a very beautiful father-like thing to do, to just want to keep looking after children. And I'm not entirely sure it came out like that. It might just come out a bit odd, but that's what it's about anyway. Question 13. Is it true that Pressure is about the fans? No, absolutely not true at all. Pressure is about those. It's not even about them, but I've had problems in the past with those few little people in these chat rooms and things like that just are horrible and cause trouble and upset people and just say a whole load of nasty stuff quite a lot. It's about that, because for almost every day of the year, it just doesn't touch me at all. It makes me smile. It goes over my head. I just do not give a monkeys about it whatsoever. But every once in a blue moon, for reasons I can't say, maybe I wake up in a bad mood. Who knows what? I don't know why. But anyway, every once in a blue moon, it touches a chord, and it's not the people that write it that I'm bothered about. Because I really genuinely don't give two monkeys for what they say. But it's the thing that touches me, and why I react to it sometimes is because I spot what I know to be good, long-lasting, loyal fans suddenly coming out with stuff that seems to be coloured in some way, but by these others' little miseries, and for some reason that bothers me, and it gets to me. And so when I respond to it, I'm actually responding not to the people that wrote all this rubbish in the first place, but the few people that have gone from being brilliant fans to suddenly getting caught up in it and getting a little bit nasty themselves about it, and suddenly finding fault with things that they've loved in the past, and that gets to me. And so Pressure is about those moments and how it makes me feel when I see what I consider to be good fans being corrupted, if you like, by these miserable little few. And it's nearly always a fleeting thing. It really isn't something that bothers me for more than minutes at a time, genuinely. But when it does, it's quite deep. Question 14. I've read that the lyrics are deliberately lacking in specifics so that people can interpret them to suit their own lives and experiences. Is this true? And if so, why did you do that? Well, I think, as I said on a previous question, that the album is about some quite heavy things in my own past, and so I don't want to get specific about what they were, because it really is heavy, a lot of it. I mean really heavy, and I just don't want to talk about it in any great detail. They are by and large things that I'm not particularly proud of, and certainly if I'm not lacking in pride with them. They're not things that I want to go on and talk about. It's private, a lot of it, and I wanted people to be. I wanted the lyrics to be vague enough without being vague. That's a bad way of putting it. But I wanted people to be able to read the lyric, and for it to have a connection with an experience in their own lives, good or bad, without me having to say, A to B to C to D. This is what happened to me, and then this happened, and then that happened. Really, really get graphic about what went on. But I wanted to give or to leave an overall feeling, an atmosphere of something very dark that you can only really guess at, but arguably make a good guess. And therefore, because it isn't that specific, you can connect with it because it maybe touches a chord with something that happened to you, which might be something very, very different to what happened to me, but there is a connection. And that can only be done because of the lack of specifics in the lyric. And so it's trying to write a song on two different levels, one where people can connect to it without actually knowing exactly what I'm talking about. And another one where, for me, I am actually, because I know the truth behind it all, being quite honest about certain things that have happened to me, but you'll never quite know what they are. Question 15. Jagged sounds epic and visionary at the same time. How much of it is based on real moments and how much of it is fiction? It's all based on real moments, all of it. I mean, none of it is fiction, but as I've said before, it is very, at times, it's quite amplified, exaggerated. So, again, as I said before, there is this thread of truth running throughout all of it. But every song is based on things that have happened, things that I've been involved in, or wanted to, or just my life. It's memories, not fiction. It's memories, and then I've just flowered them up a little bit. Question 16. Why did you change the album name from Jagged Halo to Jagged? Well, it's quite simple, to be honest. I was really, really trying to get away from the whole religious thing. I failed miserably, actually. There's so many references to it still, but the difference is, I think, between this one and the last one is, whereas in the last one I am deliberately trying to have a go and make big old statements about my whole religious or lack of religious beliefs. With this one, I'm not. With this one, I'm simply using it to highlight feelings and so on that were not necessarily mine, but people around me, and just using it as a starting point to highlight why I thought certain things or didn't think certain things, and so on, based on these memories that, as I say, I've been writing about. So difficult to explain, to be honest, in a forum like this, because it would really need to be examined properly and to go through it all song by song, and I can't really do that. But the reason for dropping the halo off the end of it was simply to try to take out one of the religious phrases, if you like. But then I went and called the song Halo, so which actually was called something else. So just made a right mess of it, really, didn't I, if you think about it? So, well done, Gary. Rubbish. But that was the reason for it. And Jagged, because of the content of the album, because it's looking back at as I keep saying, these darker things that I got into. Times really when I felt as if I might even be broken as a human being, mentally I might be damaged in some way because of this stuff and the way I was thinking and things I was involved in. The word jagged, as in sort of broken and fragmented edges and sharp edges and all that sort of thing, seemed to be far more appropriate to the lyrical content than Jagged Halo did. So there's kind of two reasons, really, and I'm not sure either of them are particularly appropriate, but that's what they are. Question 17. The Pure album came out on Eagle. What happened to the Eagle deal? Well, I got dropped effectively. They did, what was it? They did Exile, and then they did Pure, and maybe some live albums. I can't even remember now. And at the end of all that, they came back and said, look, we've spent all this money and we haven't got it all back. So, they actually offered me a lesser deal. They offered me that they were going to do the next album, which became Jagged, but they wanted to offer me a lot less money for it. And it was rubbish, actually. You couldn't live off that. So And because I was unrecouped, what it meant was I would only be able to live off that, because they would give me that advance for the album, and then I would obviously need that to make the album, but I wasn't going to get any more money out of them, because they were going to use the sales of that to pay off what they reckoned I owed them from the previous 2 albums, because they weren't recouped on those. So you effectively sign yourself up to having no money for the next 2 or 3, 4 years, however long it's going to take you to make the record. So, that's tempting. So didn't go for that one. And so we parted company. The strange thing is about the way record companies see these things is, if you actually look at how much money Eagle made by having me on their label, they actually made a fortune. They made loads of money, but they don't see it like that. They see it as to how much they paid you as an advance on the record, and whether they got all that money back or not out of your little bit. The fact that they're actually still earning their own big bit compared to the artist's little bit, they don't sort of take that into account. So it's a really, really strange way of seeing things, but that's common, and that's what happened. Question 18. Why did you sign to Artful Records? Well, this was much to do with Steve Malins, actually. I have a huge amount of respect for Steve and his judgment and his knowledge and insight into almost everything to do with music business and me and so on. Very valuable. And so Steve had started working at Artful, and I thought that was a sensible thing to do. I mean, Steve said that he thought that Artful was a good label for me, and looked into it. Had a meeting down there and spoke to the man behind it all and so on, and agreed. It seemed like a really, really good place to be. It had a very similar feel to it to Beggar's Banquet in the early days. Small little unit, but connected to a big label. So you got all the advantages of being connected to a big label, but actually having the intimate relationship, if you like, of a small label. It felt really, really, really good, and I was just full of confidence about it. I really did think that was the right way to go. Question 19. Many people thought that the success you had at Artful was very impressive, and were amazed and disappointed when you left. What happened between you and Artful that forced you to leave? As far as I'm concerned, the main reason that things went well at Artful were largely due to Steve Malins, who is since still with me. So please don't think that there's any ill feeling between me and Steve because Steve got me to go to Artful and then it all went bad. None of that at all. I think we were all a victim of the same situation, to be honest. I know on the outside it looked as if that, we had 2 chart singles. The Hybrid album was one of the most well-received albums by the Numan fans that there's ever been, I think, even more than an album of new stuff, which was a little bit disappointing, but not really. So the truth of it is, though, in my opinion, Steve got the Hybrid album together, and he was the main person behind the Exposure album as well. It was Steve that suggested I'd worked with Rico on Crazier and was instrumental in getting that together. If you go back far enough, you talk about Random and so on, where my whole sort of career in ASONS kind of goes back to. That was a Steve Malins idea. He come up with that. So everything good that happened at Artful wasn't, in my opinion, anything to do with Artful. It was to do with Steve. And then there are all these other problems that started to creep into it. And these are the things I can't really get into, but it was just significant, major problems that were creeping into it in terms of trust and so on. And I just realised that absolutely no way in the world was the new album gonna, as far as I could stop it, was that going to come out in Artful. I just thought it would have been a massive mistake for the career, for me personally. Just it would have been tragic, and that's why I didn't want to stay there, and that's why I've come out and done my own thing. Question 20. What advantages are there to you by having your own label? Is it all about control? It's not anything to do with control, actually. I don't know, people sometimes assume that if you have a big hand in what you're doing, it's because you're a control freak. It's nothing to do with it. I mean, the reason I like doing my own covers is because I just enjoy it. I don't think I'm good at it. I don't think I make great album covers. I'm far from it. But I like it, and it's my career, and I live my life because I want to do things in it that I enjoy doing. And if I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but I like playing it. And I know I'm not the best singer in the world, as I've said too many times probably, but I still like singing. So this is what I want to do. And having your own label, it's, well, a lot of it, to be honest, is, when you've been with lots of record companies over the years and you've been promised this and promised that, and then it's not happened, and you just realise that you're just fodder, really, and you're lied to and you're let down, and it's just, it can get a bit demoralising and a bit depressing. And there's this whole political tap dance that you're forever involved in. You're trying to work yourself into the favour of this man, and if you take this little bit of advice that he gives you, then maybe you'll get a bigger promotional budget, because he likes to feel he's had an input into the record. It's just all this rubbish, and it's just crap, and it's just going on all the time with all of them, and the bigger they are, the worse it is. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I spent most of my adult life being caught up in it, never liked it for a second, and I just don't want it anymore, and I don't think I need it anymore. And so that's really what it's all about. It's being able to wake up in the morning and say, I think we need to do a single that's got 7-inch, 12-inch and CD. That's going to be the formats for the single, and that's what's going to happen because I've decided it. Might be a stupid decision, might be a massive mistake, but it's mine and I know it's going to happen. I don't have to get political with people. I don't have to do all that ducking and diving and running around that goes on. I just don't have to do any of that. There's no compromising whatsoever. I can make the music I want. I just fully understand my limitations and my problems as a solo artist with an independent label, completely understand where I'm at, and I can make all the decisions that I need to based on what I think is the right way to go and the people around me that I trust. And that's what it's about. Question 21. With Jagged, your vocals have never been stronger. Have you had any vocal training in recent years? No vocal training. I really don't know actually whether the voice is any stronger or not. It might simply be that I'm getting better at knowing how to use it. I got a feeling that that's probably more the case. I just can't imagine why I would be singing any better. I'm getting older, so your voice does change a bit as you get older, I'm sure. But I really don't see what could have happened to have made it any better. I've tried to make the new album have all these sort of really big anthemic choruses, and I layer voice upon voice, to try to get as big a sound as possible, which is normal. Most people do that. But I've never had an album where I sung out a tune on it, so it's not as if I'm singing any more accurately, I don't think. Although I do seem to live actually for some reason, but that's probably because of the in-ear system, because now I can actually hear myself, whereas in the old days with the big old speakers on stage, I couldn't actually hear myself very much, strangely enough. Just a big massive wall of noise. And so I think that's probably what's happened live. But as far as the studio is concerned, I don't know what's happened. But a lot of people have talked about the vocals on the new album being particularly good. It must be because I'm just now writing things with such a better understanding of what my strengths and weaknesses are. I know what words I can sing with more power than some others. I know what syllables work with my voice and not others. And it's probably just because I've been doing it so long, I've got to understand me better. And so I'm able to get more out of myself. But without actually being any better, I use what voice I've got in a more well thought out, more well understood way. Question 22. How important do you feel your voice is to your overall musical sound? Well, this is something, as you probably may have heard me say before, I'm not a really big fan of my voice. I don't think it's a particularly good voice. But I do understand, and I've come to recognise that it is different. It does have its own sound, which is a good thing, I actually think. There's plenty of people that can sing really well, but they just kind of don't sound like, they just sound like everyone else. Great voice, but you just could be anyone really. Where I do have a fairly distinctive sounding voice, but it's not. I don't want to keep putting myself down. It annoys fans when I do that. But in all honesty, I do not have a massive range the way a genuinely good singer would have, and I really doubt that I have anything like the power or the projection that, again, a really, really good singer would have. But I'm not bad. It's all right. So how does it fit into my overall sound? I would guess it's a pretty big part of it, because it is a distinctive sounding voice for all of its weaknesses in other areas. It's I'm pretty cool on stage with it now. I sing in tune most of the time, and I can sing in front of some fairly big sounding records, and it doesn't sound small and overshadowed. Though I do help myself with that sometimes. I would say, without wanting to big myself up in any way at all, because I really don't think like that, I would say that the voice is a fairly important part of my overall musical sound. Question 23. Will Jagged be released as an extended album, as you've done with some other albums in the past? We are definitely doing an extended mixes version of Jagged, and that's going to be coming out sometime in the summer, although we don't actually have a release date for it, but that is the next thing that's coming out album-wise. And the good thing about the extended mixes is that there are so many things going on in these records, especially something like Jagged, that there is so much going on. Some of these songs are 50, 60, 70, 80 tracks of stuff. This is why I think you can listen to it many, many times and still keep hearing different things, and why some people find the album takes a while to get into, because there is so much going on. But you can't really explore that with just the one song on the record. It's only when you get into the extended mixes that you can really start to separate things more, and you can hear more clearly, because they're suddenly exposed, because there's no vocal on top or other parts on top. You can hear all this other stuff. I think it helps me, because it shows people more just how much work has gone on, and how just how dense and how many layers and how intricate these recent albums have been, and so I'm kind of looking forward to it, because I think it's gonna sort of show off perhaps a little bit more what me and Aid actually did with the record, in a way that may not fully come across with the album as it is, because it's, as I say, even though they're long songs, they're all still pretty cramped. Question 24. You said that you wanted Jagged to sound heavier, darker and more anthemic, but most of the songs have very long intros. Is this your way of building tension? I always thought about how the song would sound live when I was writing it. Every song I wrote, I was trying to imagine what it would be like on stage, and I kind of liked that. As one song finishes, you get all these ethereal kind of sounds and things as the next one kind of creeps in, and then whap, you're in again, and it's just, I love it. I like the way the songs suddenly kick in live, and the crowd go mad, and all the lights come on, and it's just vibey. Question 25. Why have you gone back to using live drums after such a long time? Well, actually, I know a lot of people have been saying this, but we had live drums on Pure, because Monty plays live drums. The only difference would probably be is that they were, I think most of the time, they were then actually cut up and processed and almost made into loops, although not quite. So they have been there before, but on Jagged, it is definitely just somebody sitting in the studio playing along to the track, and that's your drum part. There's no processing. In fact, on all the Jerome and Richard stuff, there's no processing whatsoever. There's no EQ being added. There's no effects being added. It really is just raw. This is what he sat down in the studio, and this is what they played, and I think that gave it another level of energy, which I didn't expect really. Question 26. You said after the Pure album that with Jagged you were trying to make an album like Pure, only darker, more aggressive and more anthemic. Is Jagged the album you intended to make, or did it turn out differently? It turned out differently in that I thought it was going to be a Pure version 2 when I first started it, because I love Pure. I thought my favourite album at that time. I'm really, really happy with it, and I was reasonably content to just do a better version of it. I thought I could make a better album than Pure, but along very, very similar lines, that sort of guitar rock thing right at the front. And then as time went by, I didn't really want to do that anymore. I wanted it to become more electronic. I wanted to get back into that way of working again, with more experimenting with the sounds and so on, rather than just sort of massive big guitar passages. And so that really, it kind of evolved, I think. And I think although Jagged is clearly the follow-up to Pure, I definitely do think it's moved on, and it has changed direction slightly from where Pure was. It is darker, and it is arguably a bit more aggressive, and it's certainly more anthemic. I mean, almost every chorus on Jagged is just massive and epic. So I would say, yeah, it is very much the album that I'd intended to make, as far as you can, judge when you just have this vague idea in your head of what you're after. I think, yeah, definitely. I think it's a good follow-up album to Pure, and I think it's moved on a fair bit. But I think that most people that like Pure will like Jagged, because I don't think it's that far away from it. But I do think it is a bigger, more anthemic album, and I think it's moved enough away to not simply be repeating things that I've done on Pure. And in fact, quite the opposite. I don't think it repeats much of what we did on Pure at all. Question 27. What musical influences helped you make Jagged? What were you listening to? I honestly didn't find anything when I was making Jagged, especially in those last 6 months or even in a year. I didn't. There were a number of key albums that I was waiting for that I thought were really going to help me, and I won't say what they were, but they just didn't. They didn't help at all. That they were not the albums I was expecting, and I really got no help in that sense. So the only thing that I really listened to that I thought made a difference was Aid Fenton's album. I thought that was absolutely brilliant, which is why I got him involved in it. So I ended up working with the person that was probably most influential on making me realise where I wanted to go next, and with my own record. So no, I couldn't give you any bands at all that I was listening to that helped influence Jagged. Question 28. It must be hard writing an album like Jagged when these days you seem to be a happy family man. Do you still need to be feeling down to write heavy down music the way you used to? No, I don't at all. True enough, in the old days I used to feel, I have to feel the way I wanted to write. If I wanted to write down or heavy sort of music, the down in the park kind of thing, I guess, or whatever, then I needed to feel like that. I had to be in a bad mood to write that kind of stuff, and I only wrote really when I was in a bad mood. As soon as I was happy, didn't want to write. So things are very, very different now from that. No, I don't know why that is. It might be since I've had children, I've decided I definitely want to keep the pressures, if you like, and all the strains that you go through with this sort of creative life away from them, completely untouched. I want them to stay completely untouched by this. So I definitely developed a new way of thinking and behaving, which means that I don't sort of wear my heart on my sleeve quite so much. But it's been going on much longer than from when the children arrived. Maybe it's just getting older or growing up. I don't know what it is. But for me now, creativity has become something that I can do without having to live it. I don't have to feel that way. Maybe it's because I am older now and I've got so many experiences and memories to draw on. I really honestly couldn't pin down why it's different, but it is completely different now. Question 29. Your early releases were very minimalistic. Jagged is huge, a massive sounding album. How did this evolution happen? I kind of know what you mean. They were recorded on 16 track for a start, the first 2 or 3, I think. So the difference between that and what we're doing now is just phenomenal. But they weren't intended to be minimalistic. I think I was just doing the best I could with the limited knowledge that I had about recording, and also with the equipment of the time. You're probably not gonna make an album that sounds as big and as layered and as clear, clarity-wise, as Jagged is with a 16 track recorder. So there are clearly differences there. And also I think Replicas was made in 5 days, I think. Can't remember now for sure. With Jagged has been 6 months to a year, depending on how far back you want to go and when you consider it starting. So it's a very, very different thing. And as far as the evolution itself is gone, we're talking about a 28-year span. All the time the equipment is getting better. All the synthesizers, the samplers, the plugins, the studios, everything is getting better and better and better, and making it easier, up to a point to record greater quality and greater clarity and so on, then I'm getting better as an artist and as a producer and learning how to use that technology and how to make better albums with it. So all in all, you have a situation where all of the various parts involved in making albums are becoming better. So it's no surprise, I suppose, really, that Jagged just sound a lot bigger than some of the earlier things. Question 30. With most of your albums, and especially the last 4, you've managed to push technology way beyond anyone else and managed to stay at the forefront of music as one of the most innovative figures electronic music ever had. How do you manage to constantly push yourself to the edge? I would really be embarrassed if I agreed to any sort of claims like that I was pushing things that far forward. I always try, and certainly I think what me and Aid have done is to really work hard on making this album sound as cutting edge and as forward looking as it possibly can. But I don't think either of us would claim that we're way ahead of other people. There's plenty of people that we admire and that we think of as being very clever and very creative people, that we are fans of collectively, me and Aid. And I think we were both stumble somewhat if we ever thought that people were trying to hold us up as being way ahead of those. I'm just proud to be in the same group as far as I'm concerned. So and this thing about one of the most innovative figures electronic music ever had, I'm just proud to be a part of it. I'm proud that I'm considered to be influential. I don't need to be considered the most influential person electronic music ever had. I don't think that's true. I'm just really proud to be a part of it, to be one of them. To be considered influential at all is a great honour, and I'm very, very proud of it. And that's more than enough for me. And I know that there are people that I look to who I consider to be very, very clever compared to me, and so I would put them ahead of me, way ahead, a lot of them. And not just one or two. There's a lot of people I think have done some absolutely genius things, and have really, really pushed boundaries forward, and have really opened up people's eyes to different ways of making music and of putting sound together. And we kind of all learned from each other. Some people would listen to what I was doing way back when and get inspired by that, and then they would inspire someone else, and I would listen to that and I would go off again, and it just keeps on going round and round and round and round. And I don't think any one person can be considered the most, because we've all probably borrowed from the other people in the list as well. But I know I'm really happy that some people think that, obviously it's cool for me if people think I'm the most innovative figure, but I personally wouldn't agree with it. I'm just, like I keep on saying, I'm just really, really proud to be to be considered innovative or influential. That's just cool enough for me. Question 31. What or who would you say shaped the making of Jagged the most? Well, that's quite an easy question. I think, I obviously wrote the songs, and I had a fairly big say in the direction of the album and what I wanted from it. But then you have to go to Aid. In terms of people that I've worked with on this record and many others, then Aid is massively important in the shaping of Jagged, massively. And it really was a team effort, and he did a huge amount of work. And I would go back to saying that my songwriting, or the songwriting side of it, was very much down to me, obviously, but the sound of it, Aid had a massive hand in, and I feel like I contributed to that in a good and meaningful way. I'd be lying if I said that I thought the bulk of the finished sound of the album was down to me. It's not. A big chunk of it is down to what Aid has done and added to it. So he was massively important. But equally, it couldn't have been done without me, and I wouldn't have ended up with the same album without him. So it was a fantastic team effort, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Question 32. What keeps you so driven and so motivated about making music? When I was younger and I decided that I wanted to be a pop star, or whatever term you want to give it, rock star, whatever, it wasn't a decision, for the next year of my life. But it's not. It's like a lifestyle decision that you want. This is what you want to do with your life. This will be as far as into the future as you can foresee. Anyway, and I never really got much beyond 30. I must be honest. When I was that age, I didn't think much beyond that. So for me, the next sort of foreseeable stage of my life, this is what I wanted to do, and I don't understand why people would think that the whole motivation thing is sort of impressive. That the fact that you're so driven and you keep on going, and when things are going bad, what made you keep going? Well, what else am I going to do? What else do I want to do? I don't want to do anything else. Not as my main career. I love it. Making music for me is as much of, almost more of a need than anything else. It's closest thing to therapy I've ever had. When you write a song, and it's about something that's very close to you, an experience you've had, or whatever it might be. Take for example the little in vitro, the baby situation, which was grim in the extreme. You have to think about that really, really deeply to be able to write about it accurately. Every new line in the song has to be true and accurate, and a very honest representation of how you feel and the way you saw things. And to do that, and to come up with a lyric, especially about something that important, you have to think about it very, very, very deeply. And simply by doing that, I guess you're doing the same thing as if you would be doing if you went and sat with a therapist and talked through your problems and just aired them and got them out in the open. And so it is important, and it is a good way of understanding what you are and who you are and why you've become those things. And it's just, I would do it always. I would do it if I didn't earn a living from it. So it doesn't need motivation to me. There is nothing else I want to do more. Question 33. How would you like to be remembered? I actually don't want to be remembered, without trying to sound glib about this at all. When I'm when I'm dead and gone, what's the point? I don't care. I'm dead and gone. What's the point in being remembered? It does me no good whatsoever. And there is always a chance, strong chance, in fact, that the people you leave behind will be affected by such things. What people say about you and the way in which they remember you cannot sometimes isn't good. I honestly don't know how things are going to work out for me, but you just leave behind something either for other people to live down or to live up to, and I just don't see any good in that. I would like to leave behind a security for my family. I would like to leave them with memories of me which are just warm and loving and so on. But as far as the rest of the world is concerned, I see no advantage whatsoever to being remembered at all. Question 34. It seems that much of your music is concerned with the idea of something unknown but terrifying waiting for you in the dark. Why is this such a common theme for you? It is a common theme, actually. I would completely agree with that. Something unknown but something waiting. And I think that's because that's the way I see the world. I find the world a very frightening place, and I don't mean in obvious ways like terrorism and so on, but just in general, people, everyone has a secret. Everyone. Everyone has another side to them that they keep to themselves. People I just don't know. Anyway, so I don't know how else to answer it. I see the world that way. I see something waiting, lurking around every corner, be it literally around the corner, or the next stage of your life. It just seems to be potentially dangerous at all times. And I don't mean this in a way where I'm morbidly walking around with my head in my hands worrying about what's going to happen, because I'm not like that at all. Quite the opposite. I'm prepared to meet all these things head on and deal with it. I mean, I don't ever panic. I did once actually when I saw a snake. But that aside, I don't panic. I can be in all kinds of heavy situations and just simply do what you have to do and get on with it, almost to a ruthless degree, actually. And because of these syndrome things that I have an ability to separate emotion at times, really quite usefully. And so I don't really worry in that sense, but nonetheless, I do have this overriding kind of feeling about things waiting. This is why I consider myself to be, how can I put this? I'm aware, prepared, not depressed, not overly anxious, not frightened like a little rabbit, but just sitting there with my eyes open and my ears open, watching for what's coming, and that 1 second advantage that I might have over someone else that doesn't see it coming quite as quickly as me means that I can avoid it and maybe someone else can't. And that's pretty much the way I see the world. This is very, very oversimplifying things, but that's the way I see the world, and that is why I think that is a constant lyrical theme for me. Question 35. Do you get anxious when a new album is being released? As a rule, no, actually. It's always been sort of good fun, and I've never really been that bothered about it. Jagged has been very different, and I've been really anxious about it. Lots of reasons, I suppose. It's on my own label. I'm completely self-funding, so every penny that's spent on the promoting of, and touring of, and so on, is entirely down to me. So there's a big worry attached to that, because I'm not the most successful thing in the world, and it's I have no record company to fall back on. Nothing really. And if I make a mistake or a bad decision now, then it's going to hurt me for years to come. And there's other things that rely on me now, people and so on. So it is a worry. And I've been watching the download situation with Jagged, and that's been terrifying. At one point we were downloading more than Pure sold. So that was a real worry, and I don't know how much it's going to hurt us yet. But there's all these things going on, and obviously I'm 48 now, not 21 anymore. So the part of my career that I'm at is obviously nearer to the end of it than it is the beginning of it, unless I'm very, very lucky, which I doubt. So all in all, these things are becoming important, very, very important to me, and you say things like I'm in a position where I don't live on the next single. If the next single fails, and it doesn't really matter much to me. I'm still Gary Numan, I'm still famous, and I'm still all these things, and I still got my fans. But there is the truth to that. I fully understand that's true. But equally, I'm in a more fragile position in that I can make mistakes now that will have such an effect. If they last for as long as some of the other mistakes that I've made, then they will live longer than my career. I will be finished long before I get a chance to recover from those mistakes. So the need now to be careful and to make sure that you don't make any big mistakes is enormous. And yet here I am on my own. All the more exposed and all the more chance of me making some big mistakes because I have no safety net. So it is something of a worry, I suppose. But on the other hand, and this might just be down to the fact that I'm stupidly optimistic and always have been, I actually find it really exciting. So, a bit of a contradiction, I suppose. I am worried about it, but I'm really, really excited about it at the same time, because it's just the way to be. If you got to risk stuff, you want to do this for a living, then just do it. Do it with no safety net. Absolutely give it everything you've got, and be worried about it to the point of giving it that extra few hours thought, or that extra degree of super concentration to try to make sure you don't make mistakes. But just do it. Really get out there. It's like when I first started, people were talking about, well, why don't you go and get a proper job and, mate, you've got something to fall back on if the music thing doesn't work. that's a mistake. If you've got something to fall back on, you never quite give it enough. Most of the time, I don't think. Anyway, you need to need it. It has to be an all or nothing need, or else you don't go for it hard enough or full on enough. You don't give it everything that you've got, and so sometimes having these little safety nets to fall back on is a mistake, and so I'm kind of there again. And obviously, like I say, it is a worry because now I've got other things that rely on me, and I kind of worry for them. But I just can't help but still being 17 at heart, I think, and just thinking it's a real cool, exciting thing to be doing. Question 36. Many people have mentioned that Jagged, although a very forward-looking and contemporary album, has echoes of an older Numan sound. Was this deliberate? And if not, how do you explain this feeling? Well, it isn't deliberate at all. And I can honestly say that I actually don't hear these echoes that other people have mentioned, but so many people have mentioned it, it must be true. It may be a lot to do with what AIDS contributed to the album. He's got a sensibility for what he considers to be Numan-ish, that is perhaps more developed than mine, because I don't know what's meant to be Numan-ish. I just do stuff, and it just sounds like me, and that's it. Don't think about it too much, to be honest. Good job I don't, probably, most of the time. So these echoes that people talk about, the first person to mention it was Gemma, way back. She said, there's something about the way that you're singing that reminds me of the way that you used to sing. And I don't understand that at all. I cannot hear it. But other people have now said the same thing. And as I say, many people have talked about this. It's somehow reminiscent of what you used to do, the way you used to sound, although it actually sounds completely different, but there's these echoes, and I just don't know what to say about it. I really don't. Anyway, all I can say is I do understand it's there. I actually don't know what these things are that people mention because I can't hear them, but I do know they're there. I believe they're there, and it absolutely was not deliberate. It just must be. Maybe it's an attitude thing. Maybe the fact that I'm writing now for the genuine love of it, and trying to be experimental again, and trying to come up with new sounds in a way that could only really be matched by what I was doing when I very first started, certainly with the electronic music anyway, sort of Replicas period and Pleasure Principle and so on. The attitude that I have now is very, very, very similar to the attitude that I had then. Maybe it's that, but honestly, I really, really don't know. But anyway, people seem to think it's a good thing, so I should just enjoy it, I suppose. Question 37. Do you think that you have peaked with Jagged, that this is a definitive Dark Numan album? I absolutely do not think that at all. I do not. I thought Pure was a great album, and I think Jagged is better, and I think Jagged's a really good album, and I'm really, really proud of them both, as I have been of all the last 4 albums, actually, and I think each one has got better. But I think the next one will be better than Jagged. I can make another album which is full of melody and anthemic choruses and all that kind of thing. I can do all of that, but I can make it more exciting, more live, sort of gig orientated, just a more exciting thing to listen to live. I think a lot of it might be to do with tempo. I just need to start moving things up a gear tempo wise and get out of this slow sort of medium pace menacing sort of vibe that I've had without losing that dark edge at all. I've got a whole load of things going through my head as to what to do next already, and so I don't feel that I'm wanting for ideas or wanting for direction. I feel very strongly about where I'm going next and what I'm doing, and I'm very, very confident that the next album will be better than Jagged. Not that there's anything wrong with Jagged. I'm not saying that, but I just think I can go somewhere slightly different to where I've been before, retain all of the things that are good about Jagged and Pure and so on, but add something else to it, which will give it another level to reach that I've not been to with this one. I've never been so happy with what I'm doing, with the music that I'm making, and that is having such an effect on my attitude to it and my enthusiasm for it, that it's just pouring, absolutely pouring. And now I've got a partner, if you like, that can help me and shape me and give me all the encouragement I need when I get down sometimes, and just, it's a really cool thing, and I'm loving it. Question 38. What goal did you give to each of the guest musicians that played on Jagged? I didn't give them any goal at all. The thing is about the people that played on Jagged, from my own band to Jerome to everyone else, these are all very, very clever players. You know, they know exactly what they're doing. They've all been around a long time. With people like that, you don't need to stand over them and give them direction. You know, they will listen to your song and they will add to that song what it is that they do best. That's why you choose them. That's why you want these people to be on it. Although, as it turned out, that pretty much everyone on the album is actually a friend of mine. So that's, for me, that's a doubly lovely experience. But nonetheless, you expect these people to add something to your record, which first of all is extremely well done, brilliantly played, but also that it would be completely right for the track, because they have a sensitivity and a musical ability that can adjust to that sensitivity, and that's why these people are so good. So I did nothing at all other than give them the track. Question 39. Jagged has been described as a headphones album, a claustrophobic roller coaster ride. Would you agree with these opinions? I do think that Jagged, it is a headphones album, yeah, but it's also a very good live album. The thing that the place that I think Jagged doesn't work so well in is in the car, and that's simply because the quieter moments in between the big bits are very quiet, and you actually miss a lot of stuff. I mean, some of the intros, well, not like the intro to the song Jagged, for example, you just don't hear it in a car. I've got a fairly noisy car though, so that might be something to do with it. But I don't think it is entirely suitable for listening to in a car, unless you're just prepared to accept that there will be bits where you can't hear much going on. On headphones, you can hear everything, and you can listen to the album again and again and again, and I think each time you listen to it, you'll notice more and more and more. There is so much going on that initially you just pick out the main bits. Then when you become more familiar with the album, you start to, you're able then to pick out other things going on in the background that perhaps you hadn't noticed the first 1, 2, 3 or 4 times around. And I think that's one of the strengths of it. And I think that's where the quality of the production, if you like, without trying to big us up, is where it's strongest, in that it is multiple layered and there is a great deal of stuff going on. And it does mean that the album stays interesting for longer. The other thing about Jagged is I think that it does work particularly well live, not just on headphones, which would seem to be the opposite. You got this great big loud, lacking in clarity quite often live environment compared to headphones, which are all very close and intimate. But it does work well live. As far as I know, when we did the launch gig at the Forum, the clarity was absolutely stunning. Aid Fenton and Simon, the soundman, worked closely together that night to make sure that it sounded the way it's supposed to sound, and it was very, very impressive from what I can gather. So it does seem to work really, really well live. I think those, the hugeness of those choruses and the dynamics from the big bits to the quieter bits translate very, very well in a live situation, because it's just still right there and in your face, as it does on headphones. But it's just this car thing that I think is a bit of an issue about it. Question 40. There is a total contrast between the verses and the choruses on the songs on Jagged, with massive bursts of energy and then quiet, ethereal moments. Why do you do this? I love it. I love that dynamic. I really do. I do not like songs that start and then not much happens and then they finish. It starts as big as it's going to get, and then after 2 or 3 or 4, 5 minutes even, it hasn't really got any bigger. It hasn't gone down. Not much has happened. It just stops. And I don't like songs that fade out either. I don't fade anything anymore. I haven't faded songs for years and years and years. Just stop it. When your song's finished, stop it, and just fade it out like you've run out of ideas. Just a personal gripe, that one. But this idea of I call it the waiting for the good bit moment. Although I actually think all the songs are good bits, but I should call it waiting for the big bit. It's that sense of anticipation that, especially again, you go back to a live situation where you've got this song, and it's you got a lovely verse, and it's all very pretty, and some great noises and grooves coming on. It gets a bit bigger and great, and it always just fades to almost nothing, and then this massive chorus comes thundering in. I think that in a live situation is really, really exciting to listen to, and it's certainly really, really exciting to actually perform on stage. It's a brilliant thing on stage. The power of it is just awesome. And you just really let yourself go and get into it in those big chorus moments. Question 41. What made you move into more industrial music? I didn't make a decision to get into industrial music. I didn't even think of it in terms of labels. I should answer the question as what made me get heavier rather than into industrial, right? So what made me get heavier was simply giving up all of my ambitions for radio play and commercial success and all that sort of stuff, just with sacrifice on every album since, just going back to writing songs that I loved for the love of doing it, and because first and foremost I liked that song. Whereas up until then, certainly for the previous 5, maybe 10 years, I've been writing songs because I wanted to get my career back on track. I wanted to be on the radio because I thought that was the right thing to do, and I was playing all these political games with the record companies and just trying my best to do what I could to salvage a failing career. It was only when I give up on all that I started to write once again the better music of my life. When the bit at the beginning, when I wasn't concerned with all that record company stuff, I was very proud of, and the bit I've done more recently, very, very proud of. The bit in between, there's some good music and all that. I'm not dismissing all of it, but the attitude behind it and the reason for writing it was because it was becoming less and less heartfelt and more conniving and career orientated and just desperate, really. And the ultimate result of all that was Machine and Soul, and I don't think I got to say anything more about why I went back to doing what I'm doing now. Question 42. How does it feel to be considered one of the main originators and influences on so many different types of music, from electro, pop, through dance and goth and on to industrial? Even hip-hop has acknowledged your influence. I am massively, massively flattered by these sorts of statements and thoughts. I'm really, really proud of it. And I do actually, I very, very, very rarely talk big about myself. I've always said that I think I've just been lucky, but I can't help but be really proud. It would be almost understandable, I think, that some of the modern electronic bands might look back towards me and the other people that were around when I started as some kind of an influence. I would be really proud of that if that was just the case, because any kind of influence that you've had on other people is a very, very flattering thing. It is something to be proud of. But the fact that for me it's happened to such a wide range of genres of music. Not that I'm good at genres, but that so many people from so many different kinds of music talk about me as being influential, that have covered my stuff and sampled it. I cannot be anything other than massively proud of that, and I am, and it's made a big difference to me, to my life. I think it's made a big difference to the career. It certainly encouraged me to write from the heart more and just do what I want to do and not be concerned about commercial success and so on. Although I want it, I really want to be successful. I do. I want to be massive, but I want to be really successful making the music that I want to make. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, I just wanted to be successful and I didn't really care what sort of music I made. And that was demoralising and soul destroying. And so this influencing that I have now and this sort of respect and the whole sort of innovative tag that I get given is just an amazingly cool thing, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I do not take it for granted at all. I'm very grateful for everyone that says it. The way it's changed, the media's reaction of feelings about me is just staggering. You could have thought that I would be talked about the way I am now, compared to what people were saying a few years ago. It is a very, very cool thing. Question 43. How do you see your current role in the music scene? I honestly don't think of it in those terms. I just do what I love doing. I'm trying to use the technology in as advanced a way as I possibly can. I'm trying to get new sounds, new ways of doing things, to move forward and to not repeat anything that I've done before. As you know, I hate nostalgia with a passion I can barely put into words. So that my goal is always to try to make an album that has moved forward musically, sonically, new sounds and so on. And I don't mean that I just completely abandon anything that I've done in the past. There are some sounds that I've used on many albums. If I think it works and I can't find anything to replace it, I'm not opposed to using it again more than once if I feel a need to. But nonetheless, I will constantly search for new sounds and new ways of doing things. I try to stretch the way I sing. I'm trying to just, I'm forever trying to get bigger and more powerful sounding tracks and albums. So it's just an ongoing thing for me. But how that fits into music, I honestly don't know, and I'm not sure that I have a role as such. I can't imagine that anyone's looking at what I'm doing as some kind of a yardstick, so, some kind of a measure as to what can be achieved. That'd be lovely if it was, but I just can't imagine that for a second. I'm just like doing what I'm doing, and as far as having a role in it is concerned, I just don't think that way at all. Question 44. So many of the current wave of electropop acts are clearly influenced by you. You've said that you're not that keen on electroclash, so how do you feel about these bands? I'm in a slightly difficult position with this sort of question, and it's to do with age. I've been around a long time, and so the bands that you mentioned and many, many others in that sort of genre, I actually think, majority of them, I actually think are really very good. They do seem to be influenced by that late 70s, early 80s sort of electro sound, which I was a part of. And so for me, I sort of listen to it and think, this is really good, and it's very well done. It's a really good, very well done version of what some of us were doing a long time ago. Now, I know to their audience it probably seems all new and exciting and vibey, and so that's brilliant, and it's cool that it's there. And I have no problems with it whatsoever, and I absolutely do not mean this as any kind of an insult. And it really is entirely my problem. It's the fact that I've been around for such a long time that makes me see it this way. But the influences that they've drawn from to get their music are clear to me, and so from my point of view, I can't learn anything from it. I think that's the point. I mean, I couldn't listen to it and think, oh, that's interesting, that's new, and I've not thought of that before, because I've kind of have heard it before. I just think it's a really, really good version of it, and I really do enjoy it, a lot of it. But as a songwriter, I'm not going to listen to it and get much ideas from it for where I'm going next. It doesn't have much to do with where I am musically at all. Question 45. How do you feel about your 80s contemporaries who are following the retro nostalgia route to try and restart their careers? It feels like picking up a shovel and digging your own grave. It's like admitting you've got nothing new to offer. It's living on past glories. It's everything I hate. And so while I have no bad feelings at all for the bands that do it, and I fully understand the reasons that some of them do it because I spoke to them about it, I think for me it would just be a massive, massive mistake. And I've actually just done it. I mean, I just got offered, I'm going to do a tour of America. I just got offered a different kind of tour in America, where I could go out as part of an 80s-ish kind of package, and it was going to be excellent money, much, much more than I might get by being on my own, if I get anything at all from being on my own, because it costs so much to be there. But 3 or 4 times the size venues, really big venues, and all massive. And I've just said no to it, because that's just not the way I think I should go forward. And I think all of those retro things are damaging if you want to have a career of making new albums and new music. If I just want to keep on making copies of Artful Electric for the rest of my life, or reliving We Are Glass moments and writing that kind of thing again, which I'm sure some people would rather I did, then maybe it is the right thing to do. There's certainly a number of people that do these nostalgia tours that end up having quite a good living out of it, but they just stay doing nostalgia tours. God, I can't imagine anything worse. It's just not what I'm into so much that I can barely put it into words, and it's not going to happen for me. It's really not. Question 46. When bands like Sugar Babes and Basement Jaxx cover or sample your songs, is it embarrassing or are you proud? I'm proud. I'm very proud. People so often seem to think that I'm going to slag off the Sugar Babes because it's girly band pop song music, but I'm not going to do that. I thought they did a really, really good job on that song. I know it wasn't my lyrical vocal, but I just think they're really, really good singers. I mean, I hadn't bought any Basement Jaxx albums. I mean, I couldn't honestly say that I was a big, massive fan because I didn't really know that much about them. But I thought that what they did, with the ME sample was great. I thought it was a really, really good song, and so I'm really proud of it. I really, really am. I think it's such a, as a songwriter, when other artists want to sample your songs or cover them completely, whatever it might be, that is probably the most flattering thing that can happen to a songwriter when another artist wants to do something with it. When it happened with Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson and Foo Fighters and Fear Factory and all of these people, it's been. I am genuinely amazed that so many people have done it, and I've never been embarrassed by it, never once. I don't have this high and mighty opinion of me that I consider other people's thing to be less less worthy somehow. As if I'm going to look down on Sugar Babes or other kinds of music because it's not as good as me. I don't have a high opinion of myself. I don't have hardly any opinion of myself. I just know that I don't play guitar very well. I don't think I'm that good a singer, and I don't think I play keyboard. All those things. That's what I think. I don't care. The funny thing is, you see, I don't actually think that writing music is that difficult a skill. Of all of the creative arts that there are, I would say that writing songs is the easiest and most disposable of all of them. There are tens of thousands of people in bands signed at the moment around the world that are all writing songs. All got their fans and all got thousands of people that think they're great. So that's a lot of people. And there are probably 10 times as many as that can do it, but just haven't got a deal yet or are still waiting to be discovered. It's just world's full of it, full of people that can write songs. So how can that make you feel as if you're doing anything special? You're just doing something that so many people can do. I don't take it. For that reason, I don't actually take it that seriously, and that's why I've never ever felt important or special that I do this for a living, or that I've got fans even. I'm just genuinely grateful for it, and I love my life, and I'm really glad that the situation is the way it is, and other people do think it's important because I benefit from that, but I actually don't. I'm not curing cancer. I'm just singing about me being weird. That's all I'm doing. That's not great, really. So I just love the fact that other people want to cover my songs. It's as simple as that. Question 47. Do you listen to your own music for pleasure? I actually don't listen to music for pleasure much at all, me or anyone else. It's very, very rare that I can sit down and listen to a bit of music just for the sheer pleasure of listening to that bit of music. I certainly can't do it with my own stuff because all you can hear with your own stuff is what you should have done. And you just think, oh God, why did I use that reverb? And why didn't I change that melody? And that could have been better. And no, that should have been bigger. You just hear all the things that you should have done better with it. And I think that's a good thing. If you just start listening back to your own music and just think it sounds great, then you're just missing the point somewhere. You're supposed to be on an eternal quest to make what you do better. I think that's my job, to keep trying to make better music. So don't listen to your own stuff and think it's great because you've given up, and that's rubbish. When it comes to other people's music, you haven't got quite the same sort of attitude about it, but nonetheless, you're constantly learning. you are forever going back to school to try to find ways of making your own music better. And that means as much as from learning from your own mistakes as it is learning from other people's victories, triumphs, and their mistakes as well. So you listen to music that you like, and you cannot help but analyze it, pull it apart. If you really, really like it, how did they get that sound? What reverb did they use? What snare drum did they use? All of the techie things that you can use to help make your own music better. And then simply to just listen to the sheer genius of some people that come up with ideas that you just wouldn't have thought of. And you're not looking for ideas that you can rip off and duplicate. The only way I can describe it is you're looking for little sparks that ignite your own imagination, and it's all about trying to find those sparks. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from other music. It can come from a book, from a conversation, from looking out the window. And I'm not trying to be arty, but it honestly can. I've mentioned before how I got the rhythm to some song. I can't remember what it was now. Chameleons, I think. By listening to an unusual tick over of a lorry that pulled up beside me at some traffic lights once. It's just everywhere. You just have to keep your eyes and your ears open for it. But it means that you don't listen for pleasure anymore, because you just can't stop searching. Question 48. You used to be hated by the media. Do you feel vindicated by the high level of respect and credibility given to you these days compared to what was said about you in the past? I don't see it that way. I really, really don't. I understand completely why people would think that I felt vindicated. That I felt as if I'd won some kind of victory, as things have turned out. But I just don't think of it that way. I genuinely think that a lot of the problems I had with the press in the early days were of my own making. I think if I'd have been more mature, just a more sensible person, then I would have handled things quite differently then. If I'd have been older, I probably would have handled things very differently. And I think in some respects, I was the instrument of my own downfall, because I just reacted in a juvenile way to many, many things. And I do think some of what was said was unnecessarily harsh. Some of it was very venomous, and an awful lot of it was just intended to be career damaging. And I guess that's inexcusable. But nonetheless, I still take an awful lot of the blame for the way that people were about me. And I think that quite often when people said that they thought those songs were rubbish, they meant it. It was a relatively new kind of music at the time, and I guess it took the press, that in the same way as it took many, many other people, a year or two or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or more to understand it. To understand it the same way as the fans understood it already, and to appreciate it for what it was. I know an awful lot of people that just thought it just wasn't real music. It was computer-generated nonsense, and they didn't understand what it took to make it, and they didn't understand the pleasure that people were getting from it, and so there was a reaction against it. And I was the biggest act at the time, and so I took the full brunt of that reaction to it, I think. And so the fact that it's now been reevaluated, now I have this credibility and respect that I didn't have before, it doesn't make me feel vindicated. It just makes you feel lucky that I'm still around to enjoy it. Question 49. What do you enjoy playing more, guitar or keyboards? I actually think the guitar, actually, if you're going to stand on stage and play something, a guitar is such a cool, sexy instrument compared to keyboards. In the studio, I actually don't care, really. They're both as good as each other in the studio. In fact, the keyboard is much better to write on. It's much better for me, actually, to write on, should I say. Yeah, given a choice, I'm going to pick up a guitar every time. In fact, the only thing I've got now, the only instrument I've got that still really, really means anything to me, and I have any kind of allegiance for whatsoever, is my red Gibson that I've had for years, my guitar. None of the keyboards, I don't care. As soon as I'm finished with them, they just go. I think I've got a Mini Moog in the garage, but I held on to that because I thought I ought to. The guitar is much more of a, I don't know, I actually don't know how to put it, but I have a much closer relationship, if that doesn't sound too anarchy, with my guitar, and I love it. I really, really love it, and I feel like I've been through thick and thin with it. I don't feel like that at all about keyboards. They're just something you plug in and use and then get rid of. Question 50. If today's Gary Numan could meet the Gary Numan of 1979, what would he say to him? Go, that would take a long time. I would say, first of all, you just got to grow up more quickly than you are. You've got to. A number of things, really. I used to think that I had this almost instinctive feeling for what I should and shouldn't do next. Somebody would ring up and say, the Daily Mirror wants to do an interview with you, and I would think about it for 5 seconds, and I would just say nope or yes. And it would all depend on what kind of feeling came to me, as if I had this sort of sixth sense, this feeling about what was going to work for me or not, and it was just ridiculous. And I went for years, the first 2 or 3 years like that, until I made so many mistakes. Even I had to realise I was just an idiot, and that wasn't true at all. I would tell myself to recognise that what I have, my voice, the way I play, and the way that I write, did have a value, and was worth persevering with, rather than what I did, which was throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, just slowly get rid of it and replace it with much better players and much better singers, because I thought that was the right thing to do, to make better music. And I didn't fully appreciate that for all of my faults and of my limitations, I nonetheless have a style and a sound about me which is what people liked, and some people liked, and that I should have enjoyed it rather than try to get rid of it or to smother it in their records. I would say do Wembley, but don't say you're quitting. Just do it, take a break, grow up, come back. So many things. I'd probably not put out 3/4 of the singles that I put out, but I would choose different songs next time, because I've got a habit of picking the wrong single again and again. Would never have made Machine and Soul. No, just on and on and on. I mean, I got such a long list of things that I would consider to be mistakes that I've made over the years. I'd have to sit me down and give me a right talking to.